Okay, so here we go. The objective here is to look at the simulator that was
Mm-hmm.
developed for ITN 160.
Okay.
And I guess I want to look at it from a couple of perspectives. One, as to what the student gets when he starts the class, how the student interacts with it, and then some of the things that we can do with it depending on how much time we have.
Okay.
So one of the concepts of this version of the simulator, and by my own annotation, I'm up to version 3B,
Mm-hmm.
um, is that it all comes in one zip file. So this is one PyCharm project up here. It can be zipped into one zip file and the link to the zip file posted on D2L. So what the student needs to do, he needs to go in and unzip this thing to some place where he knows where he unzipped it, and then not start a new project, but open this as an existing project. And then he'll see something like this. Oh, so Chuck, if I go off the track or you have any questions, just holler and we'll try to get back on the track.
Okay.
So what we have in this project is 4 files that are meant to be help, assistance, cheat sheets, and a list of exercises that the student could do on his own if he wanted to.
Okay.
So those are just here for documentation. I thought it was convenient to kind of wrap that up into the same project. So students don't have the excuse of, you didn't tell me and I didn't know.
Right.
The information is right here. Then we have an exercises directory. In that directory, there's a pictures directory, which just happens to have the sun and the moon pictures in it, which are needed for the simulator.
Right.
And in the exercises directory, please ignore this. This is just something I was working on.
Okay.
There are 2 important things. One is the simulator itself that's sitting in this file. And the other is what I call the exercise 0 file, that this is what I'm giving students to start with. So in my plan, which of course they don't always follow, we start with this program. This is what you see. This is a given. And if you run this program and this happens, then everything's installed.
Okay.
So that's the intent. So let's do what we were supposed to do and say, I'm going to keep this pristine and create another version for my own purposes. Very important, hello. Very important that I watch what I'm doing. Hold on, I don't think I was watching what I was doing. Let's start.
Well, you did the copy, but go ahead.
I did the copy, and then wait a minute. I did the copy. Oh, that's right. There's a new menu over here that there didn't used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're going to do the paste. And just because I'm not feeling creative, I'll just call it exercise 1.
Yep.
So it's important that their exercises that the students work on are in this directory. That lets you do 2 things. One is it lets your code find the simulator code, and the other, it lets your code find the pictures when it needs it. So let's blow this up a little bit, making it easier to read.
So it's importing it from the exercises project, the simulator code.
Right. So in the exercise project, in the simulator file, it needs to import something called GUI app.
Right.
So let me just say that because of the way the program is structured, there are some things in here that might look a little scary to students on day 1 or day 2. The fact that we have a class statement here, and we've got these functions here, and we have this funny looking thing down at the bottom here. The message is, this is what I'm giving you as a starting point. If you keep this structure, just add things to it. The actual understanding of the structure is more for class and object-oriented programming. So the idea behind what the student's supposed to do is broken into 3 different functions. In this function, they can write whatever they want, that they want to have happen when the program starts. So it's only going to get executed once, hence the name of the function, and it's setup kind of information, whether it's GUI setup or variable setup or whatever, it's the setup information. If there's nothing you want to do when you start your program once, you must have the word pass in here, or else things don't run right. If you don't have a function called once, things also don't run right. So if you don't want to do something once, that's fine, but leave this the way it is. The next important and required function is called loop. And as you might guess from the name, this is a function that the simulator will run for you every second. So anything you want to do repetitively once a second, you put into this function. This function down here is not required. You use this function if you're dealing with push buttons. So it's a function particularly written for push buttons. And the way it works is if you push a button, this function will be given the number of the button that is pushed. So that's not for day one, but down the road, that's what you have. So you can you could actually leave out, and things would still run if you're not using push buttons. So how's that sound so far?
Well, okay, so I'm assuming they're not going to be modifying this code, though.
They're going to be adding this to this code, yes.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so when we run, so let's do something simple. Let's run this again, and we notice that when the simulator program runs, you have a title up here and a message over here. So those are the, oh no, cat, go away, cat. So that's the easiest thing for a student to do. When the program comes up, put your own title and put your own message. So let's do that. So if we come over here and we start putting things into this section, one of the things, again, because of the way it's built and the documentation supports it, the things that students do have to start with the word self and then a dot. And most of the things that I do either use the word get, set, or change. So if I look down this list, which is provided by PyCharm, there's something that says change title. I can just double click on this. Before I do that, I might want to note that the two things that I can do is provide a new title and also provide a color. So double click on this. And the first thing is the new title. So we'll do ITN 160. And we might as well be fancy. We'll put it in red. And then we'll do the same thing to change the message. It's, you know, it's kind of a nice idea if students put their name in there, then when you go to grade the exercises, that information is there ready waiting for you. Ah. So now we've made a couple of changes. You know, this could be a day one kind of a program for students if you guide them through it. And now when we run the program, we'll see. Yes. Okay. So this mistake is one that I only have to make at least once a day. This is exercise 1, but I forgot to change it, to change the run for exercise 1. So we do this once.
Right.
And now we have exercise 1 running, and the title has been changed to ITN 160 in red. The message has been changed to my name in blue. So that's as simple an exercise as you can do to show how to use it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I don't have to change either one or both. And if sometime later I want to change the title to something else or the message to something else, I can do that wherever I want to within one of these 3 functions. I can't help but stop to do a little bit of advertising here for PyCharm. Students are highly encouraged to keep track of what's going on over here. So this is PyCharm's look at your code, and it says no problems found, and that's a good thing.
Right.
So if students learn to keep on working with their code until all errors and warnings are cleared up and they get a green check mark, then
Looks like you've told it to ignore some of the formatting type things like line spacing before, after comments, stuff like that.
oh no, not at all. If I put one line here, it's going to flag this, and it's yellow, and it says, "Hey, I expected 2 lines, and you only get
Right.
1."
Okay. I
So
thought it normally did it like within the function also, but I could be mistaken. Memory
I
is
think
the first thing
between
to go.
functions in a class, it likes 1 space.
Gotcha. Okay.
Between the class and the beginning, it wants 2, and down here it wants 2.
Okay.
But, those are easy enough things to do.
Right.
And also, I guess, to continue my advertising, under code, there's a button here, there's a menu here for reformat, and that'll
Right.
do a lot of those things for you.
Yes. I've tried that, and I don't remember if I already had the stuff because I looked at everything, it was flagging and, corrected it, whether it affected its run or not.
Right.
But
Well,
whenever I
some
tried
of
that, it didn't do anything for me, probably because of that.
some of these things are suggestions, some of them are errors.
Right.
I'm enthusiastic that students follow all the suggestions, because if they do, their Python will end up looking like Python instead of looking like Java.
Right. Now, I definitely like PyCharm. It's
Right.
a good application, a good IDE.
So let's do something else here
Mhm.
so that we can undo it later. We're going to do a self dot set. And what I want to set is I want to set one of the lights. So the command is set light state. It takes 2 things in the parentheses. The first is the name of the light, and the name of the first light is red. And that light can only go on or off. So I'm going to turn it on. So if we run the program now, part of our setup is going to be to do the same thing up here and also turn the red light on. So now that we have the ability to put text into our program and control the lights. So that's set light state. And here we're going to put another self dot set light state and take the same light and turn it oof, because sometimes I can't spell good.
Right.
So, when we do that, the simulator actually pops a message, unfortunately once a second.
Doing it in a loop.
Yeah, because it's in a loop, but it recognizes that oof is not spelled correctly. And it also will make sure that red, that is one of the 4 colors, which just happen to be red, yellow, green, blue.
Right.
So now that we do that, if you look quickly, light comes on, 1 second later, light goes off. So that's maybe also day 1, but certainly by day 2, you can get them playing with the lights. Not very interesting, but what we can do, maybe as early as day 2 or so, is you can say, well, not only can I set the light state, but I can also get the light state. And if the reason for getting a light state is that I want to check the condition of it. So we just do self dot get, and we find get light state. And I want to look at the red light.
Mm-hmm.
And there's only one thing in parentheses because that's the only information that get light state needs. And it will return either on or off. So I'm going to say if you get a light state of on, then what do you want to do? You want to shut it off.
Right.
And now's a good time to tell them about colons and if statements and indentations under those colons. And that's actually discussed in one of these cheat sheets, this first one, which we can look at later if we have time. So what do I want to do if the light is on? I want to turn it off. Well, If the light is off, what do I want to do? Probably turn it on. Okay, so that's it. Okay, here we go. So PyCharm has taken a styling exception to something I did. It's marked it over here in the border, and it says you have multiple spaces before your operator. I could either correct it, or I could go for reformat file and take a look what happens on line 14 when I do that. It makes a single space on either side, and we're back to a green check mark. So let's see how this works. So what we've got now is a mistake. Yes, of course there's a mistake. Let's try again.
So it should be flashing, basically. Yeah.
So the other thing you want to do when you're running these programs is you want to keep an eye on the window over here for errors. If there are errors that come up either once or repeatedly, then something needs some attention. The intent of all of these programs, though, is that none of the user part of the program belongs down here in the text window. Everything that you need to show about your program belongs in this window, unless you're looking for some programming help and maybe you want to print some stuff down here. So now we've got headings in text, we've got a light, and we've got a very simple if-else loop. So next thing up is probably the buttons. So word of warning, do not do anything with the buttons in the loop. It's not designed for it. It doesn't work well in there. If you're going to do something with the buttons, do it down here in this function, pb_clicked. And what we're going to do in response to a button click is we're going to do another self.change message. And the message is going to be
Button pressed.
Button clicked. And we're going to add, of course, we have to discuss what it means to add a number and a string and whether or not Python's going to let us get away with that. So far, it looks like we've gotten away with it.
But it'll probably,
well, that's when I offer students to bet. You know, who's willing to put their money where their mouth is and tell me what's going to happen. So we'll take a peek over here at the window. We'll hit button 2, and we get an error.
Because it's not a string, right?
So you won. It says I can't stuff together a string and an integer.
Right.
And it's not a bad time then to talk a little bit about the fact that these variables have a type, and these types are not compatible in the way I've used them. But not to worry, Python provides a string function whose purpose is to convert numbers to strings. So the first thing that happens is that the number gets converted to a string. Next thing that happens, the numbers will be stuffed, this string, which is fixed, will be stuffed together with this string that depends on that variable. And it's always nice to point out that if you click on the variable here, it will show you where else it's used in the program. So you can kind of keep track of things. So now when we click on button 2, up here it says button clicked is 2. And I could just as well take action on that button. So that's what this function is for doing things with buttons. And if I want to do different things with different buttons, then I could write another if statement that says something like if number equals 1. Well, let's make it 2 so the lights line up. If the button pressed is number equal to 2, then we're going to do a set light state. And I know that the yellow light is next to button 2, and we'll turn that on. So that's busy doing its blinking thing. If I hit button number 1, it says button number 1 is clicked. If I hit button number 3, it says button 3 is clicked. Button 4 is clicked. And of course, we're trying to get a little suspense here. What happens when you press button 2? Well, 2 things happen. One is the message changes and also the yellow light goes on. So that's where we are with that. Let's see. And I'm trying to keep track over here. I've put too many blank lines in there, so I'm going to take it out and get my green thing back again. So depending on how tight we want to keep to our 30-minute limit, it might be a good time to look at what's going on here in these help files that I provided. Why not? This one is a PDF file, and I stole it. I didn't make it up. And it's my favorite Python 3 cheat sheet from some guy in France.
Is that the one that's currently in the course?
I think so. If I put it in, the answer is yes. If Jason put it in, I'm not sure. But I took it and just built it into here. This is a great cheat sheet once you kind of get some understanding of, what all these pieces are talking about. So students may come back to this many times in the semester to kind of refer to something that.
And that's all the stuff that I like to have available in the course in module 0.
Sure. But now it comes right with your exercise.
And that's fine. And it can also come with the exercise.
Absolutely.
But I like to put it in module 0 so they always know right where to go. Of course.
Absolutely, yes. Now, I've not been encouraged by how often students use that cheat sheet.
Which is why I said we all know how that works.
So let's take a look at a less pretty cheat sheet for the simulator. And I guess I can make this a little bigger. This does describe everything that there is to say about the simulator, some of which we've talked about. You must have these 2 functions, a once function and a loop function. If you don't, your program isn't going to run right. You might have a PB click function to provide push button handling. And you may choose to use any of these functions down here in any of these 3 functions. So these are all things that depend on what you're going to do, and hopefully I group them logically. Here's change title, change message. There are 2 prompt and text entry areas. So this is the stuff for number 1. This is stuff for number 2. The picture can either be set to sun or moon or flip between them. The lights, the names of the lights are red, yellow, green, blue. We saw get light state, set light state. This one takes one thing, which is which light. This takes the light and also what state you want to set it to. We haven't looked at the sliders. The sliders can be used in 3 ways. One is get the value of a single slider by name, and the name is red, green, blue. The other is get slider values, which will actually return all 3 values in a list. And the other, which was one of the things that I added into the class after thinking about it, is something that allows you to set the slider values so you can set them to any value you want between 0 and 100. So you can do some kind of neat simulations by having your program move the sliders instead of just you doing it. Last feature is the dot, that black dot that's on the simulator. There's a set circle color that takes 3 integers between 0 and 25 and mixes them to a red, green, and blue value. And then there's also a get circle color, which returns the color values in a list as 3 integers. So that's the simulator. There's nothing else going on there. The simulator exercise sheet lists as many exercises as I could think of. And again, I'm not sure students took advantage of this. I think they could have learned a lot if they had followed through these exercises. This is where we start. We did this to change the title and the message, and then we started playing around with the button. This went a slightly different route. Exercise 2 was the sun and the moon, and then turning the lights on, the red light on, all the lights on, and, you know, going down the road to more and more complicated exercises. And of course, I have a sheet, my own copy of this, that has solutions to all of these. So let's just go look again at how this thing mapped out. Title, message, a prompt field with a text entry place, another prompt field with another text entry, 4 lights, 4 buttons, 3 sliders, a circle that you can either set the color or change the color. And in the simulator, this button here is set to be toggled. So this is a button, except instead of having text in it, it has an image in it. And if I click that button, the image changes, and that's a simulator function. Students can change it on their own, or they can find out what's going on there. So the advantage I see to this is that this can be used for a lot of projects that otherwise we had to go outside of the simulator, like the agriculture product exercise, assignment, not a project, where you had temperature and humidity. Well, here's 2 sliders. You can set temperature and humidity.
Correct.
You can create a time that changes up here, and one of these can be whether the sprayer is on, sprayer off. Of course, what I was thinking about when I did these sliders was using the value of the slider to mix a red, green, blue color for the circle. So that's, you know, a pretty easy lab to say, as you're moving the sliders, change the color of the circle to match these red, green, blue values. I provided a handy dandy quit button. So that quits. And the rest of it is really just kind of going through these exercises, building up complexity. The program inherently does not hang. There is nothing to hang. There's only one process. The process, for the students who are brave or curious, is connected to this file. And you sure don't want students looking at this file on day 1, 2, or 3,
Right.
or changing it. But anybody who is curious can start digging into this file, and what they'll find here is GUI 0 being used as a library to create the simulator. So everything that the simulator does is based on the GUI 0 library. This over here is a trick that actually I never would have thought of, giving credit once again to my friend Bernie Greenberg, who put this in here to make sure that those 2 functions really were required.
Where is he located?
Excuse me?
Where is he located? Your
He's
friend
in
again?
a suburb of Boston.
Okay.
We went to college together. He moved to the Boston area and has stayed there his whole life.
Got it.
So any of this is, you know, I wouldn't say it's the easiest Python to read, but it certainly is readable. And, you know, if you're curious, you'll find certain things down here at the bottom, like there's a run command. You remember the run command, we saw it over here. Well, what the run command does is it runs the once function once, and then it runs the repeat function based on a loop delay and another function called loop, which is the function over here. And you can even see PyCharm recognizes that this is an override of the method it found in GUI app, as is this, as is this. So all those things are done by overriding these functions. The difference is if we go back to, if I can find it. Yeah, if we go back to the definition of the functions here, these 2, once and loop, are declared abstract, and this one isn't. So that's the difference in behavior. And you could argue maybe all 3 should be required, just to not let students think that they can get away without it. So that's the tour. That's the half-hour tour. Questions or comments or?
I love the look of it. And
Okay.
I'm curious if little identifiers can be put on there for what each light should be. I'm also curious if slider 3, or if any of the sliders, obviously, could be configured for 24-hour time, for example. You know what I mean? With 60-minute increments between each
Oh,
major. If there's a way to
they could be, but I don't, well, if you wanted to do that, that would be fine. But if you were
Right.
going to do that, then I would drive the things using the simulator command. And without doing anything, you'd see this thing go up from 0 to 59 and then drop down to 0. I think that would be much better information to run into, this message box. And I can show you examples of that. So
Yeah.
when I need a counter for something like a time of day, I set up just a counter at 0. Once a second, I increment it. When it gets to 23, I wrap it back to 0 and I show it up here. So
Yeah.
To change the range of the sliders, you'd have to go into the simulator code. It's not hard, but you certainly wouldn't expect students to do it off the top.
Or even just military hours. So that way make the range, I guess, 0 through 23.
You could, but that would mean the student would be making time progress by doing this, which is
Right.
okay, but that's not the way time works. So
You are correct.
so in my mind, that belongs in the loop function, and of course for things that we're doing on a 24-hour basis, you make them happen once a second instead of once an hour. So, that could be handled in there.
I really like the simulator itself. It's the use of it that has me worried, because it almost feels like it locks them in to designing their programs a certain way.
Okay.
Like,
okay.
Is there any way around that? Is there any way to call those individual functions within that class?
Okay, let me answer it a little differently. So you remember that the basis of the simulator is the GUI 0 library. The GUI 0 library is not that big and very well documented.
No, I hear you.
Excuse me?
I hear you. I've looked very recently even.
Okay. So the trouble is that on day 1, you can't really start teaching students about GUI 0 and expect them to create even a modest version of this program. You can do it at some point, but you can't do it on day 1. So the philosophy I took is I can show them this on day 1. They can play with this as it is, and then at some time in the course, I give them the old switcheroo and say, well, now is time to learn how to do this on your own. So you're going to create stuff that's much simpler, but it's going to be yours. And that's what you do with GUI 0. And they have the documentation and they have the simulator code. Making the transition is a little tricky because you got to pull them away from a place that they've grown comfortable. Now I can argue, or we both can argue, yeah, it looks pretty, but it's not how students are going to grow. Therefore, why don't we just forget about the simulator and teach them how to do simple GUI 0 programs and then just make them more and more complicated.
I have searched and searched, and I, so far at least, have not found anything like this outside of the stuff we see on Trinket, which is also not well documented, SenseHat, and doesn't have all the various options that this does. I haven't found anything else like it online. I don't know if I'm
Well, I mean, this is sort of kind of like SenseHat, but not exactly.
Right. But it has more options available. I would just love to be able to access these options in the same way we access either SenseHat or the original simulator.
Well, I think accessing them this way, with code that looks like this is close to the original simulator and almost as good as SenseHat, but we could start talking about the problems with it.
Right.
It's
and I'm not going to deny
it's
that.
close. It's meant to be as close, as easy as you can, considering that this is supposed to be kind of a day one kind of thing. You get, obviously you have to trade off. You can make it simpler and have the simulator do less. You can make it more complicated and have it do more. So the other thing that I kind of liked about this is because you have to have a once function and a loop function, then students are kind of forced to understand that real early on. And those are not that easy concepts if you're building the program on your own. So that to me was another advantage. And likewise, the fact that push button actions belong down here, they don't belong up here. So one of the failings or shortcomings of the first simulator versions is that push buttons were handled in loop situations, and it doesn't work. For good reason. Push buttons are events. They're not loops.
Right.
So could this be different? Sure. Could it be changed? Sure. Is it?
I'm not putting down your work in the least.
Well, the question is it, and that's another discussion we have to have outside of this session, is considering the pros and cons, does the pros outweigh the cons? There's umpteen different ways to structure a programming one class.
Yeah, I'm going to be very curious to see what Fred also thinks, because both of you have more programming experience than me. I love the look of it, okay?
Right.
I love the look. It's this way of using it that has me concerned at this point. And I'm not saying that there's no place for it in a revised course even, but if I would love to be able to see them access it in the way we have previously, in the way we do with SenseHat.
Okay. Well, let's do that as a separate discussion.
Yeah.
And we can talk about that. I mean, I guess, so this is my first semester with this code, and I think it was well received. I would say the only issue was weaning students off of it and getting them comfortable with writing these things from the ground up.
Right.
And
right.
that's a
now,
process.
and I think I heard that you, and you're probably the one that I heard, you like to get them to do stuff graphically from like day one.
Yes, that's part of my design and teaching philosophy. And just as we spoke, because, doing print and input statements could have been done on a teletype in 1965.
Sure. And I get it. I want them to do graphical stuff, but I also don't want to throw too much at them at once.
Right.
And I worry that the graphical stuff, for many of them, certainly there's some who are going to grasp it right away, could indeed be throwing too much at them at once. I would prefer to see
that's a matter of rate and how much do you throw at them. I'll be interesting. Of course, this has been one weird semester, but I'm interested, as always, of seeing what the students' comments are on the course evaluation.
Yeah.
Could
you, this is your latest version of this, could you send this to me again? If you wouldn't mind.
I'll just actually, or you could pull it off from my section of the course. Either one. Yeah, there may be some very, very, very minor things, but no, this is it substantially.
Yeah. And one of the things I want to watch out for is, of course, Tommy felt that even the original simulator may have just been more bells and whistles versus teaching them the fundamentals of programming. I partially agree, but I don't fully agree.
Well,
some bells and whistles.
If you want fundamentals, here's fundamentals.
Yeah.
It's an it
Correct.
bells.
You are correct. And
Okay.
some bells and whistles make it interesting
Right,
for them.
but there's
But
there's no programming concept that can't be taught in this environment.
No, and I agree.
But
Just-
again, I think we should take that into a different meeting,
We can do that.
for a couple of reasons. One is as I said, I promised my tutor person 4:15. He's a little flexible, but I don't want to run over.
No
too
problem.
much. And the other,
No,
we
we'll
want
do
to,
that.
we want to have a video that that lets other instructors kind of take a look at this. And after they've
Yes.
done that, is probably a good time for another meeting for comments, questions, or.
Sure. Absolutely.
I just know that if we don't start talking about it now, it'll never happen in the fall.
No, and you've done some good work. Make no mistake about that. Like I say, my only reservation is the way it's used.
Okay, I'm going to
That's
stop
all.
the recording at this point, just so it doesn't
Sure.